Welcome to Circular Firing Squad. I'm Marty Gensius, a counseling faculty at Kent State University and host for Circular Firing Squad. We have a summer squad, I guess you'd call it. It's all Y chromosome, this show. So it's myself, Elliott, and Mitch. So go ahead, guys, introduce yourself.
I'm Elliott Ingersoll, professor of counseling at Cleveland State University, plotter of the destruction of K-CREP, and host of Apply Topically.
Hey, everybody. My name is Mitch Conrad. I am a third-year clinical mental health counseling student at Cleveland State University. I also work as a counselor trainee at Innovative Counseling, and I don't like swimming with sharks.
Oh, I didn't know that was an option.
Good to know.
Yeah.
I side with you on that.
So we've got 3 members. We're going to have 6 questions and 3 answers for each question. Each squad member generates a question that we all have to answer, ranging from the mindful to the macabre. Elliott, you've got the first question.
Okay, this came up for me a few times this past week. What is a figure of speech that has never made sense to you?
So the one that has never made sense to me logically is curiosity killed the cat, because cats have 9 lives. And so therefore the cat can, right, like use curiosity 8 times and not be killed. And so therefore it seems more like curiosity killed the cat 1 out of 9 times approximately, but not all cats. And I imagine some cats get to the point where they've explored their curiosity enough, right? 8 times, had 8 sort of life-risking curiosity cat experiences that they are no longer interested in risking that last life, or something or some other kind of thing for cats. And so curiosity killed the cat is sort of maybe not like it's got some nice alliteration in there, but also we sort of have this other phrase that we understand cats to be sort of like the cats have 9 lives. And so therefore it seems to be the wrong animal for that phrase, in my opinion.
I had a hard time with this. I left it blank up until we actually started the show. And I put comme ci, comme ça. And because I don't know what the hell that means. And so I don't know the interpretation of that. I'm sorry. Probably listeners are going to pick up on it sometime soon and let me know what that means. But a better late than never is another one that strikes me. I don't know if that's always true. Sometimes it's just better never than having it come in late. Just, give up. So those would have been my 2 figures of speech that just never make sense to me.
Those are all really good ones. I heard this just in passing, walking down the hall. I'll start it. You guys finish it. More fun than
a barrel of monkeys?
Yeah. And I'm like, first of all, let's get this straight. Monkeys creep me out. I do not like monkeys, right? They always look at me like a cousin who wants to borrow money. And then when they make that stupid face, and you can see them counting genes in their head. They want to figure out how to get from where they are to where you are. I don't like them. They creep me out. There's nothing fun about a monkey. If you've ever read or seen the film Jumanji, you know what a barrel of monkeys could do. So that one has always I've gone right over my head. Maybe it was meant as, I don't know, sarcasm or hyperbole. I don't know.
Maybe we're the monkeys.
Yeah, another day on the planet of the apes, eh?
Maybe it's an evolution-based phrase. I'm not really sure about it either. All right, so my first question of the night for me is going to be, what do you think is the most important thing for new counseling students to work on during their first years in the program?
For me, it's they need to relax. I mean, they are so uptight at least when they come into our program. And I think that's generational. I think students have changed and the expectations of what they have out of a program has changed, and the expectations about what they need to do has changed over the years, but they really want to know exactly what to do. And that means, and so they present themselves as not very relaxed with the process. And my guess is they also then present themselves as not very relaxed to their clients. And then the other pieces that I wrote was embrace the not knowing. It's like something that they can't conceive not knowing, that they have to find out what it is. And if you let them sit in that purgatory of not knowing, you can see their eye sockets start to pop out and steam come out of their ears. because for me, the not knowing is the fun part of the job. But often students are really hung up around having to know right and exactly right.
Yeah, I think mine will piggyback a wee bit on yours, Marty. So I think some of it is unlearning, and it's unlearning maybe assumptions one came in with. I think part of it's unlearning how they've been using their brain nowadays. They have to start figuring out a way to train their brain to read. A lot of people don't read unless they have to, and that's fine. But when you have to and your brain's scanning, that can get you into trouble. But yeah, I think that's on par with relaxing too, because it's an odd combination of traits, at least for myself. I had to have enough hubris to think, oh, I can do this, so I'm going to apply for this program. I think I'd be a good fit, but I didn't know if that was the case or not. So I was just hoping to fake it until I could make it, you know. But then you have to let go of that and come in and like the ambiguity piece is very important, but that takes a while. But those are good answers.
Yeah, thank you both. I've been sort of thinking about this as we've got a new semester coming up, and right, one of the things in my job is talking all the time with new students in the program. I typically, I'm very fortunate, I feel, to have that sort of experience. And So I've been sort of thinking about, right, like not necessarily a piece of advice, but sort of like what I found was, really helpful for me throughout the process. And I think, right, like I'm always interested because had been to a ton of counseling before coming into a counseling program, and I'm always really interested to meet people, regardless. But the idea of coming into a counseling program without necessarily going to a counselor before in your life. I've always thought that that's sort of interesting, and yet there are many professions that provide the service, the unofficial service of counseling, like a teacher or a mentor, right? That students are familiar with, and so right, there's that part to it too, where like many people have received sort of the unofficial service of counseling. But I found that something that was and has ended up being the most helpful thing for me in my entire 2-year journey so far, more than any of the other education pieces. Although the education pieces have been, it's probably 1A and 1B, but has been sort of like doing my own self work. Doing your own self work inside of counseling or any sort of therapy, even if it's on a weekly or a biweekly or a monthly basis. And I understand, right, not everybody has, insurance, and not everybody has sort of like an equal copay there. And there's sort of an affordability surrounding counseling too. But I have found that working on myself has been, in terms of counseling clients right now, has been the greatest indicator for who I am in the room. Because I think that's really what determines like who you actually are in the room, sort of as opposed to, something, that, Marty, you've been talking about, which right, is the concept of doing things in the room as opposed to who are you being in the room, right? And I found that to really be exceptionally helpful, because I don't think if I had done that, I would be half of who I am, as a counselor trainee right now. So that's always been really interesting to me. I think it's, I think one of the cool things about our program is we do encourage people, and I imagine for other programs too, we do encourage people to do their own therapy and do their own work. And it can be really rewarding, not just personally, but also professionally.
I have the next question. We're getting through these pretty quick tonight. Wow. But my next question is, what's the best part of your counseling or counselor education job?
Definitely the teaching is something that it's kind of a blended answer, actually, because teaching and then right behind that writing, but I mean writing textbooks, that always informed my teaching, and that always forced me to keep up to date, I think, with a lot of the areas of expertise I'm responsible to keep up to date with. So yeah, teaching for sure, and then writing in support of that. But then my colleagues, this isn't a 1, 2, 3, they're all about equal. Man, we got some people who can bake and cook on that faculty, and we've worked this into competitions. There's a chili competition every year. There's a cultural family festival where people bring in food. I mean, we cook a lot and bring it into work, and I just love that. So I think that those are the three things that are the come to mind for me. Big shout out to Professor Durkar's winning chili 4 years in a row.
I think it's 5 now.
Oh, you're right. It's 5.
Yeah, it is some It's hard to beat. I'm down. Like I tell her every year, I'm like, all you need is to just bring cilantro for me. It doesn't like you'll just get my vote. And she's the one. Like someone else brought cilantro this year though, but it just wasn't as good of chili, right? And so it's even that thin of a line, I guess. But the cilantro line's pretty large. So right. So I'm going to take the counselor approach here because I haven't done as much sort of the education stuff yet. I've done some workshops, doing a lot more workshops this upcoming year, in classrooms and getting student feedback on that. So that's been nice. But I think the thing about counseling that I've learned pretty quick about like, what do I find is the best part of my job? I never thought I would say this, and I still kind of can't believe that I'm saying this, but it is working with kids. And I never thought that I was ever going to work with like young kids. And I likely in my career won't end up working with kids overwhelmingly just because of, the eventual intention after legalization for medical legalization will be to provide psychedelic assisted therapy. And I imagine providing ketamine assisted therapy is in my near future. And so, right, won't be providing those services to children, of course. The thing is that I did not think that I would want a couple kids, or adolescents on my caseload, no matter where I go, even if it's just one or two. And the reason for this is really interesting to me. You are sort of really forced to be present and listen to a child or an adolescent. And sometimes, and I remember this from when I was a child or adolescent, which is one of the reasons I went to counseling, is sometimes you don't feel listened to. And that's what I see right now more than anything is there are just people out there who do not feel that they have anyone who will listen to them. Not just kids, but adults too, right? And it's fascinating to me though, because I feel like I'm sometimes the kid in the room. And I find that sometimes they're the adult in the room because I will hear things from them. And I've started to notice this with my nephews and nieces as well, is I will hear things from them that are just like so profound that are so intellectually profound. And it's like, they'll say these things. Are we listening? Right. And that's, I think, something that's really interesting. Like, the amount of times that I've been sitting there and listening to a kid and going like, yeah, I remember like when I used to feel like that as like a kid or like an adolescent, or we're sitting there and going like, yeah, I kind of like remember having that experience too. And so a lot of the things that they are sort of like saying sort of remind me of my own experience as a kid. And so that's really interesting to me and really compelling. And I just think they're so smart. They're really doing their best. That's the sense that I always get is that kids are doing their best. And regardless of what their situation is. So for me, it has definitely been working with younger folks right now. And I imagine that even if I only have them as, 5 to 10% of my caseload, I think it's really rewarding.
This question came from an experience I had last week. I had come back from vacation and I had to meet with a group of international students who were coming to the United States to take their master's program. And they come to my institution for 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. And they do things to increase their language competency and they get some cultural exchange experience. My job is to have 4 2.5 hour sessions with them to kind of address American culture. And so there's 38 people in the class and we meet in this kind of large room, tables that they can sit around. And I got to teach from the middle of the room, which is always fun for me. And it started off with, I had like 40 slides prepared to talk about cultural readjustment and things like that. And we just started out with questions and they just asked such incredible questions. Now I had to preface it by saying, you have to realize I'm a screaming liberal. I'm progressive. I have certain attitudes and beliefs that are values of mine that don't fit in with neoconservative background. So when you ask me questions about that, you're going to get my perspective on it from that direction. So I had to kind of apologize ahead of time to let them know everything that comes out of my mouth is not everybody's truth. It's just my truth. But it was so much fun. I mean, they just kept coming with great questions. And usually I take a break and I just told them, we're just going to keep with the questions. I'll keep going. You need to go out to take care of your personal business, step out of the room and do it. Come back in. We're just going to keep going while we're going. And it was a really great experience for me. The students in this class were very receptive to hearing about things. I got applause at the end of it from the group, which is a politeness that international people will do, but it was just right. I mean, it just felt really right. I walked out feeling like I had contributed to the teaching piece, but I just remember walking out of the building. Nobody's on campus. They had already left to go wherever they were going to go. And I was just walking quietly back to my car. The sun was shining. And I thought, yeah, this is why I do what I do. This is what I really like doing. And having to deal with a bunch of other crap that I have to deal with in my job, it's like this was the moment or a moment for me. So that's my answer to my own question.
That's a lovely answer. I'm glad you get to do those things. That sounds like a great program.
Yeah, I've been involved with our international student group and our Center for International Intercultural Education pretty much since I got here at Kent, and they pull me in for counselor groupy kind of things to do, and I enjoy creating those environments for folks.
Well, here's a different tack. As we're recording this, the Summer Olympics are winding down, and I started to wonder, what Summer Olympic sport would you like to do in this or another life?
So for me, it's going to be basketball, which has not always been a Summer Olympic sport, but I really, really love the feeling that basketball can give you sometimes. I'm not really a football dude. It sort of exists, and I'm happy to sort of, I'm happy to sort of write like water cooler talk about it. But baseball is sort of like first love for me, and basketball is sort of right. Like I don't really know how to describe it. It's something that I got into in early 2000s, and just love the way that it can sometimes feel very ping pongy back and forth. It's very much like hockey in that way. Like baseball can get these like intense moments, but I prefer the relaxation of it. I prefer sort of the I like my playoff baseball, of course, if my team's in it. But baseball, I do just appreciate sort of like the relaxing effect. Like I watch baseball to relax. I watch basketball or hockey to get excited. And I'm not really that big of a hockey dude either, but there is something about those playoff games that is just magic. I've watched some of the Olympic stuff this weekend. Really just appreciate how you can just have, a quote unquote short dude out there who's 6'2", 6'3", which is my height, Steph Curry, who I don't, obviously, right, as a Cavs fan, there's something there, but to watch him for the U.S. team was different because, of course, then you're sort of rooting for someone who's been your arch rival for 5 years back there, and I really appreciate how he's just so fun to watch when you're rooting for him, because the way that he just like moves and like puts up those threes, and it just seems so effortless, and it just seems like he's just having like a fun time out there. And so, if that could be me, I would definitely be out there. I wouldn't say that I would want to be Steph Curry, but I'd want to play like Steph Curry. I love the three ball. It's a really interesting part of the game. Yeah, I'd say Olympic basketball for me.
He was killing it from that zone, man.
Yeah. Yeah, he was.
This was a tough question for me. So I thought, what was the last sport that I really enjoyed? And it was weightlifting. I got into weightlifting a few years back, and I thought, who would possibly enjoy moving metal around? What's the joy that happens in that? Until I started doing it, and it was like there is a sense of whole body that goes into that. I don't think in another life I'd want to look like a weightlifter. So more so, a couple of nights ago we were in a restaurant and playing was men's volleyball, and I remember in 8th grade just being a killer volleyball player. I kind of had the height, I still had the knees. I was playing tennis, so I could, I had some good leg strength, and I loved to play the front of the net. I mean, I just love to play the front of the net. So being a team sport also is a little more appealing to me if it was going to be an Olympic sport for me. So got to go with men's volleyball. Prefer to look like a men's volleyball player than a weightlifter.
Those are great answers. Yeah, I have kind of two pieces. One is one I did, not really successfully, but it was the high jump, and I could never get that Fosbury flop. There's a way you're supposed to run when you have to angle away from the bar, and then it shifts your center of gravity so that when your leg flexion kicks in, you can go higher. I could just never do it. But I did get over a 6-foot jump, just running right at it and kind of swan diving over it. That was it. But I was like, I really wish I could have learned to do that correctly. And then the other was something I'd never done, but this is tagged on to my discussion a couple of shows ago of my disastrous career in American football. And I was watching rugby, and I'm like, that's how I was trying to play football. I'm like, no, just pick it up, keep moving, just do whatever. And they're like showing me these charts. They're like, well, we got plays we're running, and I'm like, what are those arrows? I mean, it was way too complicated. These guys, they're like physically assaulting each other to get the ball back, and they just keep it moving, and they keep running or throwing it or kicking people. I was so inspired. So those would be the two that I would like to give a shot to.
Elliott, I had our coach, and I went to a Chicago public school. Our coach introduced us to a lot of stuff, rings, standing and moving rings. So we did a lot of that in my grade school, and we did high jumps over bars. And so I kind of appreciate that. Now, he did not have the padding that was probably what we needed to land on, but he was just kind of coach shake it off, we called him. So we hit some pretty hard old mats when we came over. But I remember having some joy, and because of the height, because of the leg strength, having some joy in being able to do either the scissors kick or back over the shoulder on the high jump bar.
That's a good school system.
All right. This one is maybe a bit of a reverse Uno type of question. What is on your anti-bucket list?
I took this as something that I did during my life that I wished I had never done, that would be something that people would normally do, but I wish I could erase it. And that was take my kids to Disney. That whole trip to Disney came because I was looking for work, and I might have said this on another show. They said the conference, the ACA conference, was in Orlando, and I had 2 young kids, and got asked to do an interview, and I said, well, I'm not going to Orlando. And they said, do you want the job? And I said, well, yes, I'm going to Orlando. So, we turned it into a family experience. And I won't necessarily say that was on my bucket list, but that would be one of the things that I would love to unbucket if I could, would be Disney. And I know Steph, who's not here, has just either come back from Disney or did the whole Disney thing in the last couple of weeks. So I'm sad that she's not here to hear this explanation from me. But Disney.
Well, I got these a little before the podcast, and I started a list. Check in with me in 2 weeks. I might have more, but here's what I got so far: zip lines, parachutes, Walmart, white suits, whiskey, sushi, rye bread, the black keys, cocaine, back pain, stuffy nose, bad drains, small beds, bright threads, downer pills we used to call reds.
So is that like Billy Joel's who started the fire? or we didn't start the fire?
Jimmy started that fire.
Oh, I like that. That's hard to follow up though. So yeah, a couple things. I sort of put this in put the cart before the horse at the beginning of the show. Swimming with sharks is definitely my number one here. I don't know the amount of money that you could pay me to do for that. You could pay me to do it in a cage. Which might be a title, but I think that the second one that I'm thinking of is rock climbing without like a harness. I've seen people do this, and I am like, they are hundreds of feet up. I mean, it's not like you have to be hundreds of feet up. Like there's eventually just like there's diminishing returns on like height, falling death, I guess, right? You don't need to be that far up, but people hundreds of feet up. 500, 600, 700, 800 feet up. And I can't remember what it's called. It's, it's
free climbing.
yeah, it's like free climbing, right? And that to me, I just could not. I mean, I could imagine doing it, which is why I don't want to do it. I can imagine being up there and just like, 800 feet up, and the smallest thing could like happen and sort of like put a fear response in your head, right? And you have that emotional reaction, and then something goes wrong, and you're done. And that's okay, right? Like, in my opinion, you're sort of also not done, but to do that is just, I mean, it's amazing to me, right? And I've read some, I'm not sure if it was like a journal or like a publication or like a research of people who like do these sort of extreme sports, and how there's different sorts of like makeup in their brain, perhaps related to like their, maybe an amygdalic response or something like that. And it's amazing to me that, I mean, regardless if it's makeup in your brain or not, to me, you still have to like make the choice to go and do the thing. And I'm sure people who have similar brain makeups who don't go and necessarily choose to do the thing. And so that to me is just, it's amazing what those people do. But it's definitely not something, it is, if I ended up doing that, I would be pretty, I don't know. I don't know what I'd do with myself if I ended up just waking up in a rock climbing scenario.
You hit all the things that I would never do. Okay. For me, I heard this question is, what is it something that you've done?
I like that as well, though.
Yeah. So I'm asking you that. What is something that you've done that you care to admit?
Oh, my mistakes are mostly epic, and so I can't really talk about them on podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question too. It's a question that I've thought, about my entire life, right? Of like, would I take things back or not? I honestly, and I do mean this, there isn't anything that I would take back. I certainly can feel regret, right? And things that I wish that I had done, perhaps better. Absolutely. And also, I use that feeling of regret, or that situation of regret, even if it's not the feeling, as a learning experience, as something that taught me something that's sort of integral to who I am. And so now the difference, of course, is right, like something like going and doing like a trip to Disney, right? Like that, I think, I appreciated but there's this other side to this question as well. It's sort of like, well, how would you change it, right? Even if you still ended up doing it. I think that is still a really compelling question as well. Because like I imagined, like when I went to Disney, I was sort of like 11, I think, and it was really great for me to go. And also, I do wonder, like, if I had gone there when I was a little bit older, would I have been able to ride a few more of the rides? Have a little bit of a more interesting time, and so I may like go there again as an adult. Who knows? I'm not really super into Disney or something like that, but it is interesting sort of how the timing of it. I mean, there was sort of like I feel like I sort of had a life-changing experience as a child, and sort of want to kind of like honor that too in a way with Disney, because it felt like, wow, I'm finally here,
Yeah, when I was an adult with kids there, it was all about the kids' experience. It wasn't about my experience. I went there once without my kids and basically went to Epcot and drank around the world. That was a different Disney experience as an adult.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got the last question before we get into a final shot question. What's the worst part of vacations?
Boy, since we've been on one, we got kids at university now. So, yeah. But honestly, I think for someone with me, okay, get out your, circular firing squad bingo cards. For someone with an ADHD brain, planning, hacking, prepping, all of that is just the worst. Now, my partner is very good at it, thank heaven. But yeah, and then even when you have to pack to come home, there you need a system, and it's like that's the rough part for me.
So I sort of have like two kind of thoughts here, because this question couldn't also be taken literally. What is the worst part of vacations? And I'm sort of thinking like the day I get home from the vacation, because it's sort of the anticipation of the following day, sort of like getting back to work and all that, and being like sort of like, what have I missed? right? Because I don't think about that stuff on vacation, but it does kind of like come back. But that's not really part of the vacation itself. And that part is not necessarily like a terrible thing. It's just something that I don't like. I will say the thing that I do not like about vacations is the travel, is the plane ride or the car ride. I think it's not that I'm necessarily bored. It's not that I'm not having a good time. Instead, especially with planes, it is the thing that bugs me, and the reason that I dislike this part is the checking, being so intensely attuned to what time is it? When is my flight leaving? When do I need to be here? When is the gate open? What time am I being called up? What row am I in? Right? Like there's so many, it feels like questions on a plane flight, and I don't necessarily get stressed out, I would say, but what I do is I just like don't like that feeling, whatever it is, which is like I've just got to like pay attention and be in the right spot at the right time, in very specific places for like, 10 different times, right? Like I need to make sure that I'm up at the end of the plane ride. I need to make sure that I'm at the gate at the right time. I need to make sure that I get, that I have this much time to sort of like get lunch. And I don't like to sort of like on a vacation think about specific types of time periods, because that's sort of why I don't go on vacation. So I don't need to think about time while on vacation, because I don't have things necessarily to do. There's things I want to do on vacation, sure, but it's not about like a specific amount of time. But the flight especially, and sometimes the car ride can feel like this, is the flight especially just puts me in this headspace of I need to just be paying attention to time. And in that way, it's sort of hard to be in the present moment in an airport for me. And so that's sort of why I don't like that part of the vacation. So the going there and getting there is where I am not necessarily having a bad time, but I am having a time.
I like the flying part because it means I'm not driving. And I'm kind of a glutton for that whole process. I feel like it's getting through an airport and getting on a plane feels sort of like a gauntlet that I have to work my way through. And it's sort of like a survivor challenge. And so I kind of enjoy the thrill of that. When I thought of this question, it came because, yeah, a couple of days ago, I just came off vacation. Unpacking. There's something about taking that mess of clothes, figuring out which ones you have or you haven't used, figuring out where they're going to go, get them get them in the laundry. Then I travel with a lot of tech. So then it's a matter of breaking out the bags of tech. Because on this last trip, I did a couple of podcasts that I'm connected with. And so I had to bring a full set of tech, computer, things like that. All of that has to be unpacked and placed in its place. It can't just sit in the same bag that I've had it in with forever. So unpacking has always been kind of a drag. I have to get my energy up. I try to get it done as and work steadily at it. And by the time I get all my laundry together, the person I've gone with the trip in has already filled up the clothes washer. And so it's unfulfilling in the sense that I can't do my laundry right then. I have to wait for another hour before I can do my laundry. But yeah, it's the unpacking part of vacations that drive me a little nuts. Also, cleaning out my car, because if we take my car, then it turns into a restaurant for the week and a pseudo office and everything like that. So getting things back to normal after vacations is the part of them that I don't like the most.
You're supposed to clean cars out, are you?
Yeah, I'd like to do my best to keep my car clean as possible and remove objects that people leave in it for that purpose. So, final shot question: what's your favorite musical?
Pump Boys and Dinettes, recently presented by the Hudson Players in Hudson, Ohio to rave reviews.
Oh, I feel like I'm in trouble with this answer. I'm not a big musical fan. And I just it's tough. It's tough for me because I feel like I don't like to be taken out of the moment when I watch a movie, and the switch from normal movie to musical, and some musicals are just musicals, right? But the switch from like movie to musical sort of takes me out of it. And that's sort of why I don't prefer it as much. I don't think that musicals are bad at all. sit here and I mean, music is one of my favorite things in the world. I listen to music at least for 1/3 of my day, and more on weekends. For some reason, for me, I can't get there with the musicals, and I yet have tons of friends who love them. And I sit here and I'm like, I wish that I did. I wish that I did, but I don't.
So, Mitch, what's your favorite musical?
Right. I haven't even answered the question.
Exactly.
I think the musical that I really love, and I'm not sure if, people would consider it a musical or not, but I do, is Aladdin.
Sure.
And I know it's not quite right, like the idea of like going through it all the way, but that is sort of the one of the ones that I can remember where I don't feel like taken out of it in certain songs, like the Genie songs. It almost seems like this is a magical thing that is happening right now. Of course, I'm not talking about the live version, like miss me with that, please. But the cartoon version, I really appreciate it. Certain songs in there, especially ones done by the Genie.
I just wish Eric was here for this show tonight to not like any musicals whatsoever. But I think it's a safe question for us to handle. I'm going to give you a couple that I think have been ones that I go back and watch each time. And it's not Oklahoma, and it's not My Fair Lady, and it's not Cats, and it's not anything, anything of that like or that ilk. But you have to go back a few years to get these two. How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying with Robert Morris. It is the 50s, 60s corporate culture comedy. There's also a lot of men in it. Most of the chorus work is done by men. And Robert Morris is just captures the screen with it. The other one that I would suggest is A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, only because of Zero Mostel. If you get also there's some interesting music in there, and there's some slapstick, I would say, kind of comedy involved in it. So those are the two that I put down for my musical list. And occasionally they're running on a computer screen here while I'm doing some other work. But Mitch, I would encourage you to take a look at particularly How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, and Funny Thing, if you can find it.
They always have wonderful names. I have always appreciated that about musical. Their names are just chef's kiss, wonderful.
And I think both of these are Sondheim, or Sondheim was involved in them. So I'll have to check. I'm probably not right on that, but that makes it, and they're both comedies, which I like in musicals and farces in a lot of ways. So thanks for the firing squad. Thanks to Mitch and Elliott for joining tonight. Look for some of these characters on their podcasts on thepodtalk.net. You can find out more about them at circularfiringsquad.net. Make sure to check out the Tech Savvy Professor podcast hosted by Eric and myself, and Vision Profiles, a podcast about Apple Vision Pro and spatial computing that I'm doing. Our theme music is from Menage a Quad, Real Swing Shet. That's it for this episode of Circular Firing Squad. Ready, fire.